Welcome, everyone. My name is Meredith. I work with Allison Scoberg at Consolidated Planning Group. We're excited to be with you today. We are in webinar mode, so we can't see you or hear you, but we know you're there, and we're excited to hear your questions. Throughout the presentation, I will be interrupting our speakers with questions as they come into the chat box, so feel free to put your questions in there. We have our contact information in there. You will also receive a recording of this and a PDF of the slides, which are clickable, and you don't need to write down notes as we're going because it's all going to be sent to your email. We are being recorded. And so just a little bit about Consolidated Planning Group. We are a holistic planning firm. We serve clients who have children and loved ones with special needs. We want to make sure your future is comfortable and secure, and we help with all of those details. We can point you in the right direction if we don't handle the particular concern. So we're a good first place start for your needs. And so today we're with Sara Loving from Chatterbox Therapy in Dallas, and Christina Cabral from Let's IEP Together, also from Dallas. So I'm going to turn it over to our speakers. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Meredith. All right, so let me take a moment and share my screen. And forgive me, I'm going to try to walk and talk at the same time here, and forgive me. Let's see, let's open that up. There we go. Okay. Is that visible for everybody?
I think we're on a little bit of a lag, Christina.
Great. They can see it. I'm getting in the chat that they can see it.
Perfect. So Meredith, I'll let you, I think there's a couple sections for you if there's anything that you want to touch on.
You can move to the next slide. Here's our contact information. And just a couple of things that we do. I'm not seeing the next slide. Are you moving it there, Christina? Do we need to click on start slideshow? Sorry, folks.
Oh, I think there's a bit of a delay from when I'm clicking to when you're seeing it, but this is the next. I know there's some more slides for you at the back of the document, so maybe.
Well, just go ahead and move on to yours. That's fine.
Okay. So welcome, everybody. My name again is Christina Cabral, and I am an educational advocate. I work with children ages 3 through 22. Who are in public school and need special education through IDEA and ADA to access their educational and civil rights. I believe that every child deserves a voice at the table. And I'm super excited today to be joining Meredith and their wonderful group, as well as have Sara Loving, who is an expert in her field, to really discuss more about communication and how we can support our children in public school. So there's a little bit about me again.
Christina, I'm not seeing your slides there.
Okay.
Christina, go down to share and see if you can reshare on what you are. I think you're still stuck.
Yeah, new share. I'm wondering if that's exciting. So let's see what happens here. All right, let me know if this better, worse.
There you go.
Perfect.
Bueno. Okay. So again, that's my nurture page, contact information as well. Let's see, and now my. Okay. All right, the big question always every parent has is, when did you know that something was different? We all have our little ones we bring home, and it kind of begins there. When did they smile? When did they roll over? And it just kind of continues from there. A lot of times we can look back and say, oh, I saw something different. You know, they weren't rolling over. They, they weren't making eye contact, they weren't reaching for toys, they weren't starting to babble. And that's really where we kind of start seeing those comparisons with our peers that sometimes tell us that there's something that we want to pay more attention to. So what do we do when we've identified that there's potentially a need or a gap? Getting your child tested is, so important, and it's not something that school districts are necessarily going to come knocking on your door. They don't go knock, knock, knock. Nobody knocked on my door and said, hey, do you need special education? It just doesn't happen. So we as parents need to go and ask, but how we ask is very important. Those requests have to be made in writing. You should always include your principals, teachers, counselors, anybody else on the planet really that you can think of, just to make sure that everybody gets that same notice. If you didn't put it in writing, it did not happen. A lot of times parents will say things at drop off or pick up or open house. And sometimes those things get lost in the shuffle, but also when you didn't make that formal request, you're not creating that legal timeline that is started. Once you submit that request, the school has 15 days to acknowledge your request for testing. So I would say something like, dear Watermelon School, I'm requesting formal individual evaluation for my little fireball, and areas of suspected disability are learning, communication, and attention. I say that because it's broad and it will capture all areas. Certainly, if you have a student who is deafblind, has a hearing impairment, has a known speech need, then certainly identify and call those out so they are aware of that current, understood need and disability, and they can support you in that testing. All right, so when we are testing, we are really looking for one of three possible outcomes. And the testing does one of two things, right? You're to confirm the presence of a disability or to exclude the presence of a disability. And so when you're looking at those, the first possibility is that you have the formal evaluations are conducted, but your child does not meet eligibility. That means that the level of impact for them is not rising to the level of needing educational support. It doesn't mean that they don't need, maybe they need glasses, but with their modification, their glasses, with their accommodation, they're not needing support in a school setting. Second possible outcome is that you have a disability and you need accommodations under a 504. So 504 is a civil rights law. It is all about access. That is under the Americans with Disability Act, and the 504 really protects your student from discrimination based on their disability and ensures access through accommodations to their education. I will take a quick second to get on my soapbox. That a majority of students that I see that are on a 504 should actually be on an IEP. 504s, again, they give you accommodations, but there's no specially designed instruction. There's no goals. You're not going to receive the services that your student may need to support the impact of their disability. And there's no transition planning. So that means when your children are getting near graduation, there's no goals surrounding how to support those three ultimate goals of special education, which is independent living, gainful employment, and further education. So the last outcome, the most frequent when parents request testing, is that your child's evaluation shows that they have eligibilities that rise to the level of educational need in one of IDEA's areas of eligibility. So it'd be autism, speech impairment, vision impairment, deaf, hard of hearing, deaf blind, a traumatic brain injury, a SLD, which is a specific learning disability, OHI, which is other health impairment, that would be where ADHD and Tourette's, something that impacts a major life activity, and you get medication for, would fall under that area. Orthopedic impairment, emotional disturbance, medically fragile, and intellectual disabilities.
Christina and Sarah, can I hop in with a question? What about conversations with co-parents? Can you talk a little bit about that, or does that come in a future slide?
No, so from my perspective, co-parents, if you are in a divorce situation, you have to go and pull up your divorce decree, and there's going to be a section in there discussing educational rights, and that will tell you, does one parent have full educational rights, or is it a joint decision-making process? So that's really important. And when you work with an advocate, don't be surprised. They're going to ask you for that page of your divorce decree, because we need to honor that legal responsibility to make sure that both parents have equal opportunity to participate, even if not, signing with ultimate control, to understand what the needs are of the student and how they can be supported. What about you, Sarah? Any comment?
Yeah, I think a lot of that on the legal back end is something Christina does more than I have to do. I think for me, if you have some suspicions of something, that I would just try and be open and honest. Like, even though those conversations are really hard, sometimes saying, I would just rather get all of this checked out and make sure, and that way we know one way or the other. Usually you can kind of have those conversations, and it kind of smooths over, and then it goes into the court of, like, now you're pushing into the ball goes into the school's court and getting that testing done.
Yeah, that is an excellent point, because you don't know unless you go and ask the questions. And then once you have that information, you can move forward. My screen is deciding to argue. There we go. The F stands for getting a full individual evaluation. I like to joke here a lot because there are a lot of F words, and in fact, my learner is exploring his speech, and he likes those. So, but for the purposes of today, F is for full formal testing. So testing does one of two things, as we talked about. It eliminates or it identifies a disability. And it's common to have coexisting disabilities, and we'll miss those if we aren't testing in all areas. So a full, complete, formal, individual evaluation is really what's going to give us a really good baseline and catch some of those disabilities that we might not know are contributing to their difficulty with reading or their difficulty with comprehension. And so often, a lot of these SLDs and a lot of other disabilities, they've got a gain, and it's not usually one, it's usually 2, 3, 4. So we want to make sure that we really cast a wide net to make sure that we are appropriately supporting the child's need and you see progress. So when you've made your request to the school, they've come back to you within the 15 days, and you're going to sign consent forms to go ahead and initiate those evaluations. And you want to make sure that you're testing in all areas. So when you're looking at a full speech and language, you want to make sure they're adding pragmatics. They often will drop that off unless you call it out. But that's that social speech. So Sarah can talk more on this. If I go to you and I say, I'm really sad my puppy died, and your child turns around and says, I've got Legos. That's always the example that I use for pragmatics. Sarah probably has a much better one for you. But you'll go through formal achievement, cognitive. When you ask for a cognitive IQ, there are 7 Gs, and the diag at your school will know exactly what that is, but those are all of your brain skills: long-term memory, short-term memory. You want to look at adaptive behavior, and then a formal psychological or emotional behavioral, it'll call different things in different states. But that all gives you really important information. My biggest thing here is always make sure you're requesting formal evaluations. Screeners or informal are honestly kind of cuss words. Those are opinions. So we want to make sure that we're taking formal data from instruments. And then it's also really important to call out that, especially for IQ and cognitive, but those tests are all normed on people that can hear, see, and speak. So none of them are standardized for our AAC users, and Sarah will dive into that. So I want you to be really aware of that as you're going forward, because that can impact your student in a negative way, especially if they're looking at a cognitive and IQ. You'll see a lot of times they'll try to put those students in a setting that isn't appropriate for them, simply because they don't have the typical communication. All right, one of my favorite, don't forget your related services and your assistive technology. So that's going to be all those things that you can request along with your evaluation. If you're, students having trouble with handwriting, an OT assessment in written expression, OT in sensory, OT fine motor, as well as an AT, which is assistive technology and communication. That's going to be, looking at AAC devices and other means of communicating. AT in written expression, there's music therapy, and all those things are available. We just don't really tell parents. So today I'm going to focus really more on the AT and assistive technology along with language, since we have our amazing co-speaker here, Sara Loving. The Assistive Technology Act is a powerful and amazing resource for many of our children who struggle with producing written language and verbal speech. And they can utilize that to enable them to engage in their education and their community. So with that, I'm going to pass the torch to Sara.
Thank you, Christina. So hi, my name is Sara Loving. I'm a speech language pathologist and AAC specialist in Dallas, Texas. I own Chatterbox Therapy Center, and I'm currently the AT chair of the Texas Speech and Hearing Association. And so what my goal is with these two is Chatterbox has been near and dear to my heart. We've been open for 2 years, and our goal is to provide Dallas with the only AT AAC center in Dallas, and that has been a huge step and a huge gain for us. The AT chair, we are just trying to gain more awareness of assistive technology and AAC in our great state of Texas. So we also, I have a background within literacy and AAC, schools, home health, and I worked at the University of UTD, University of Texas at Dallas, before opening private practice. So I have quite the background, but I love every minute of it because it gets me to help these wonderful, not just kiddos, but we do adults now too. So we're just trying to gain more information about this AAC and AT world. So without further ado, let's dive in. Poor Christina, you're having to handle all this. I'm so sorry. So what should we be looking for when we're looking at an AT eval? It should be completed by a team. There should be a speech language pathologist on that team to target your language. Everyone else does a great job in their facets. An OT, I need to know, what are we looking at? What are we looking for? Hand, finger isolations? What are we looking for switches? Like, there's a lot of things that they do so well that I need them in my court. I also need that physical therapist. Are they in a wheelchair? Do they need motor mode? Like, what are we looking mobility wise? So lots of other things here too, but your speech pathologist is going to be a big rock in picking the language system and kind of trialing out what those need to look like. Now, one of the biggest pieces that I often see is that their evaluations are, here's the one system we try, and this is all we use in our district. And unfortunately, that doesn't build autonomy, and that doesn't build buy-in from any of the users that you're actually looking for. So what we're looking at is that evaluation should take 3 systems. with at least 2 weeks per trial, or in our, sometimes it could be 2 sessions. But we don't want any more than 4 weeks per each system, because I'm not looking to teach a system. I'm really looking how I need to effectively pick the best system that individual may really want to use. So that's where you should be looking for in your AT evals. And then moving on, we have what we are currently using. What are you seeing in your classrooms? What are you seeing that your kid is currently using? So you may be very familiar with that big bright red Big Mac switch. A Big Mac switch is not a robust language. We do not use I'm not using a Big Mac switch for them to only communicate. That's not what we're looking for here. These switches are really meant to be used for access of modalities, accessing toys, accessing alternative ways, participation in some activities, like if we're reading a book like Brown Bear, and I have a kiddo who's really kind of struggling to get in and to get all of those words in. I just want them, their goal is just to participate. I'm going to have them access that button to say, what do you see? So their friends, they are reading it just like their friends. But I'm not using that as a communication mode. Now, the next one you see here is POD, Pragmatic Organization of Dynamic Display. That fancy little book came out of Australia. They've done some great research in that part of the world, and we're so grateful that we have explored more POD options here. POD is great because some of our kids who are not able to eye gaze, are not able to finger isolate, they're really looking at more of a robust system within the POD realm now too. So sometimes if you have, well, this kid chunks this iPad and I'm not giving them another one, POD's also a really great opportunity because it is a paper-based system. But I would have more questions about why that kid's throwing that iPad than I wouldn't. Go Talks are also not necessarily meant for communication only. This is something that is supposed to be a support. It's not a robust system. It actually is a lot of time, a lot of effort on a lot of people that are trying to get these done, because you have to make the cards, you have to slide the cards in, you have to change the pages, you have to record all of these. And so a lot of these kind of Go Talk pieces are a lot more daunting work, and they're just not meant for an everyday communication app. The last one you see on your screen is a robust language system. This one is actually called LAMP, but we use a variety of systems. So a lot of different systems are built on a lot of different aspects, and what your kiddo needs in my first 3, when that big eval, is going to be some questions, and for me to figure out what I need to do and what systems I need to pull. Not everyone is appropriate for LAMP. Not everyone's appropriate for Prolo Quo. So we're really trying to get in here and kind of figure out what systems your child needs the most. All right, so what should we be using? You see all these beautiful things, like let's talk about what we really want. So we want to make sure that they have the most appropriate education and they are the most accessible to their curriculum. We have to be able to communicate, to be able to talk about the curriculum that we're trying to access. We want something robust in nature. That means I want something that when I want to say it, how I want to say it, where I want to say it. It's not a, here's a yes, here's a no, here's a stop, here's a go. You get to pick, and those are the only ones I give you. That's not a robust language system. Now, we want them to be trialed and utilized with the most vocabulary that is possible for their success. We see a lot of different systems that come in here with 4 icons. That does not allow the most success possible with that. Now, I'm looking for, what does their fine motor look like? Can they access? I have a lot more pieces that I'm trying to dig deep into to find out how much vocabulary I can actually put on a screen. Now, the other thing that we also see is that the integrity of this device has to be left alone. Nothing should be changed from different locations. What you see on these main pages, or if there's a button already there, leave them there. Because this is where, if something breaks, or if I give them a different system like of my own, and I switch that out, now we're going, oh my goodness, they don't know where any of these icons are. I've changed all of these icons. And I just had a kiddo this morning that was very much that way. They walked in for an eval and their system was all over the place. The icons were changed, vocabulary was moved. That kiddo would never be able to be as successful as they needed to be if they weren't leaving those kind of portions on there right now. So leave them where they are. Don't change anything on these main screens. Now, if there's additional support that needs to be looked for, what's their access method? What is their supports needed? What visuals do they need? Do they need high contrast? Do they need other pieces? My goal for every kid that walks in this clinic is that we find a communication system. And sometimes we're just looking at the wrong supports to get them in the right place that they need to be. So make sure those teams that you're working with really understand that if it's not a no, if this is a no, then where's my yes? Where are we going to find the right portions of these visual supports and access methods that are really needed to be successful? Now, here we go. I have heard so many times someone has said they can't. And it just crawls all over me. I hate that. I absolutely hate that. One of our guarantees that we're going to find a way of communication here at Chatterbox. And I feel very strong on that guarantee, that everybody is communicating. And so we just have to find the way that person needs that communication. So my questions usually walk in of, well, what was trials? How long were they trialed? And then how were they seen? And what did the raw data say? Give me my data. I need to know what that data says, right? Now, the other portion of this moves into, if a learning of an AA system is like a second language, are you expecting me to come in and speak in someone else's native language if I have not had the opportunity to learn, grow, and develop in that language? It's often that we are skipping these beginning stages of language and going straight to I want, I see, and we're missing so many pieces of language. Now, there are some kiddos that do much better in a language development of chunks, right? They're Gestalt language learners. That's okay. I'm going to teach them chunks, but at the same time, I'm going to start breaking things down because our goal is to actually mitigate. Now, when we're also looking at this, we're also seeing that most children are even adults, whoever, individuals aren't given time to help support them on this development. We're often seeing that they're not given the adequate time to learn this. They're handed a system and said, I expect you to say, I want whatever it is, and I expect you to say that now. So we're truly trying to move past that and really focus on what we call dual symbol immersion. Now, the other portion of this is that we often see incorrect processes and practices used that hinder progress. We see hand over hand, over prompting, lactivated language stimulation. They're never going to be able to understand where we want them to be when we are making them do it. We are not allowing them to think on their own, and we're giving them not enough input from us. When we have a brand new baby, we talk and we talk and we read them books and we do all of this. So when I have a 10-year-old coming into my office and parents are like, well, we've this is what the last therapist, or this is kind of where we've been, we're going to go, all right, where were we hindered and why do we have, a lot of our kids have a lot of learned helplessness. So where do I need to find that these practices need to be broken down and we need to rechange and reset to make sure that these kids are super successful? Okay, so when we're looking at assessment work, one of the pieces that I've already mentioned is that we're only working with X device. I have so many systems that we have a couple of districts that walk in and they go, well, we only use ProQuo, or we only use this, or we only use that. And what I wanted to show you guys was the research in this. The research said at 14 studies of all of this information that these systems actually increase their phonological awareness, vocab, requesting, and narrative skills in communication. Now, the other portion of this is that when we reviewed and found that by taking the perspective and taking into account what that individual needed, it had more of a positive impact on that AAC system with acquisition, maintenance, and generalization of their skills. Why are we not taking into this new world of autonomy and all of these things that we've been hearing so much? Like, it's really not a new world. We want them to have full autonomy. We want them to have this self-generalization and have them understanding that they want these aspects on themselves. But if we're not asking and we're not watching and we're not finding all of the hints that they've been dropping us, all of these individuals leave us breadcrumbs. It's just my job to pick them all up and find what I'm really looking at. Okay, our next one is speech is going to be hindered. I hear this quite a bit, that actually, you know, oh, we're a little worried that if we go to an AAC system, speech is actually not going to get increased. And really, it's quite the opposite. Based upon a lot of the research studies that we've seen, and this is not just the only one as well, more than half actually reported that there were more outcomes. And one study actually stated that there was a greater increase in speech production. Another one stated it was like 90% actually had speech production and increase. And the other 10% of those just didn't gain anything. They never lost though. And, you know, we have a lot of kids that are extremely successful and very, very verbal now because they started on an AE system and were able to get off. All right, PECs. The other portion of this is we often hear you have to start with PECs. This is also another piece that has been very much mythed. And one of the other portions of this is when PECs was built, it was actually built for more of a significant gain of verbal imitations. And what we actually saw was kind of quite the opposite. Once they started, 10 months later, there was actually no maintenance of those skills. They may have gained something, but they lost them with PECs. There was no evidence at all that this portion of AAC, this PECs communication, improved any speech, verbal expression, or social communication when you looked at the long-term gains of this. They saw a lot of short-term, but when it came down to long-term, we just didn't see a whole lot. Now, the other portion of this is aided language. Now, aided language has actually been a term that's kind of been, it has been accepted into the Speech and Hearing Association around 2019. However, it has been around much longer than that. We are actively seeing new cases and new research studies coming in for aided language stimulation, which is also called modeling. Most of the time you'll hear like aided stimulation, aided language, modeling, those kind of the biggest ones in the community. But what they saw in these is a really strong and positive impact on communication behaviors. Everyone saw a massive increase in language skills on their devices, in their AAC systems, because they were going ahead and making that modeling possible. It needs to be happening more times than not. That's one of the biggest things that we see, is that a lot of people aren't getting a lot of the models that they need. All right, Christina, back to you.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah. So there's a lot of really good information about those devices and options for working with your kiddos that have speech and language needs. So what do we do with that information? So we're going to be developing, once you have all your evaluations back, you're working to develop an individualized educational plan, or an IEP. Here in Texas, we like to be special, and we call them ARDs, admission, review, and dismissal. But IEP meeting, ARD meeting, same thing, different name. And so everything that we do is a committee decision, and parents are a stakeholder. You are, in fact, the first stakeholder in that IEP team. And so once the testing is completed, you will come back as a team to review the data together. And as a committee, you look at the eligibilities and the areas of need that the student shows using the data from those evaluations. The school will provide you with a draft IEP, which will include their proposed goals, accommodations, services, and placement suggestions. But again, those are always drafts. And you should feel empowered as a parent when you go in to know that you you have as much right and responsibility to make your views known. You may agree with the data, but not their interpretation. The job of these evaluations is to pull this information, and then we as a team come back and evaluate that data. So present levels of academic achievement and functional performance, or a PLAAFP. That's a word that you're going to hear a lot. And your PLAAFP is really supposed to be the story of your child. It's what drives, or what should drive, the entire IEP. And usually what I see is it's one or two sentences, something along the lines of, Susie is very sweet, or Timmy is very kind, which is great, but we want to hear more about, what we want to think about is, how does that child show up? How are they uniquely impacted by their disability? We need to see what the student looks like at each part of their instructional day. For the moment they arrive till the moment they head home or off the bus that they're taking transportation. How are they impacted at lunch, recess, science, math? All of it matters because it's all part of their educational day. Because remember, when we're looking at this, we're looking at an educational need, not only an academic. And certainly our AAC and our AT is there to assist not only with our accessing the academic portions, but that social, behavioral, and communicative components that are all really very vital to our kiddos. Once we leave that 3 to 22 range, they've got another 70 years that we want them to be successful in their life. So we want to be as detailed as possible. That way, if anyone were to pick up that IEP document, they could read it and go, oh, I know exactly which child that is. That's Timmy. They should be able to pick it up and understand who that child is, how their disability impacts them across all educational settings, what those impacts look like for that student. And remember, this is a legally binding document that is meant to serve your child. So it's really important that we add all those pieces in there. Okay, annual goals, which is an important part of the IEP document. And those goals really should map how you get there, and includes areas of their eligibility. So your annual goals are, we talk about the goals when we're sitting down at those IEP meetings, but how are we really getting there? How do we ensure that we're tailoring them to the unique needs of that individual student? And that's why I say the goals really should be a roadmap. Your child is here, and we want to get them here. So it should really encompass the how. How are we doing that? What is the specially designed instruction that we're going to provide in order to make that gain for that student? So whether that's, we're going to work on our skills with the AAC, where we're going to work on skills to, go ahead and locate their areas for a break if they need a sensory break. Those are all areas that you would address in there. Those are all very important pieces to their autonomy. Accommodations are also another part of your document that you'll see. And there's literally a drop-down list. And I didn't know that, a long time ago when my teenager was little. Those are drop-down menus in the IEP software. So there are a bunch of standard accommodations that they just drag and drop, drag and drop, drag and drop. But what I want you to know is that you can actually write some in. There's a box where they can write them in. So if there's something that your student needs, we can add it. It just has to be typed in. So if your child needs access to an AAC device, they need, a particular writing aid or a zipper folder, you can make that determination as a team and ensure that you're writing in those accommodations to ensure that they have access to that pod or to their lamp system. And they really should have that all day long, because you talk all day long and they're going to want to talk to friends in the playground, at lunch. So these aren't just academic tools. these are educational tools that really you're going to want to ensure that you are providing for them throughout their day. Okay, students required special education support time. You'll sometimes hear people call it the SOS page, and it's, you know, everybody's favorite. But I want to always make you aware, be sure you're reading carefully and you're looking at the difference between direct and consult time. So the schedule of services is the page where we're breaking down the minutes for related services and special education support minutes. It's where you're going to put your speech, your PT, your OT minutes, and consults are amazing for staff to be supported so they understand how to support that student. But you want direct minutes with that provider. I wouldn't want, you know, Sara coming in and providing a student with consult time for their AAC. That's not going to provide the student an opportunity to support them. So you want to make sure that that's coming in as direct one-on-one services. But you need to build in AT minutes. So AT minutes are assistive technology, and you can build that into the IEP document so those teachers have time with, you know, an amazing outside provider like Sara, somebody at Chatterbox, to go and educate the staff on that device, because your student, if they're using a different communication modality, needs to have access the same way any other student walking in the door and verbally speaking to their teacher. They need to be able to have that communication back and forth in their language and their modality of speech. Okay, there's a lot of information really fast, but the point of all of this is always to do things together and working with a team, understanding that you have the ability as a parent to call meetings, question information. You want to make sure that you understand so that you're helping to make the best decisions possible for your student. And a lot of times we do a really poor job of providing that information to families. And you want to also be aware that a lot of times your campus level staff don't have that information. Districts typically don't do nearly enough training with their staff, so they don't know sometimes what is available to them. But please feel free to reach out to me. My contact information, my email is here, Christina@let'sieptogether.com. And then I've got Sara. I'll let you chime back in.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find us at info@chatterboxtherapycenter.com or chatterboxtherapycenter.com as well. And you can also scan the QR code to get more information from us.
Perfect. And I believe Meredith said that copies of the slide deck are going to go out to people, correct? So they'll have access to that QR.
That's correct. Yes, we will be sending this out by the end of the day. And so a couple of questions for you ladies. If folks are not in the Dallas area, are you able to assist families?
I'll let Sara go first. Oh, okay, so we'll go first. So I am the wonders of Zoom and assistive technology. I have clients all over the US. So feel free to reach out, email, phone call on my website, and I can connect with you via Zoom. And that's how I attend several IEP meetings.
Yes, absolutely. All of our therapists are licensed in Texas. So anyone in Texas we can evaluate and treat, or we have families that are driving in from all over the United States. And as long as they are here and we're treating in Texas, we can help. Even a phone call and client coaching, we can do that across the United States.
Very nice. Was there any other information you ladies wanted to present, or should I wrap it up?
You know, I think after last time, I worked really hard at getting through there really quickly for you to make sure that we got everything in. So I'll toss it back to Sara, because I know there's so much that you can kind of go into that I know parents struggle with in this area.
Yeah, and you know, I had a comment on here, and I'm so sorry. Like, I think the other portion of that is when you only get a couple of really like 10 minutes to have that spill. There's so much to it. But I think the other portion of that is just keep in mind if your child needs assistive technology, and we have heard over and over they can't do it. It's not a they can't, it's just we haven't found what's right for them. And so we just like to be able to arm all of our families and all of our advocates and everyone else and those therapists that they're working with the best research out there to show if you're still on PECs and it's been 5 years, they need to get off. If they're still on, you know, a Big Mac switch and that's all that they're doing, it's time to get off. Like, so I think a lot of it is yeah, there's a lot of here that is a lot more, technically speaking. However, I think the goal for Christina is a very big advocate of AT, and it's been amazing to have her on our side. It's just been more of a, if you have been told they can't, it's not like, let's just find why, like where the can is. And so just kind of keeping that in mind, that there's a lot of really great research out there. There's a lot of great input out there. And I think sometimes it just comes down to needing the right support in the right places to get that.
Actually, I had a parent meeting this morning where we went over some evaluations, and this probably is a frequent problem I've seen with a lot of parents. They either child is completely, you know, what most people say, nonverbal, and you know, you've always taught me complex communicator, which is very true, because there's always something that they're communicating vocally. There's some vocalization happening, but either they are assumed to be not capable of using a system. That's one problem I'm seeing a lot. If you could speak to just how do you overcome, you have a child that's not communicating, whether it's a genetic condition or a cognitive difference, and you know, people just presume they don't have the capacity to produce any functional communication. And then the other is they're verbal, they're talking, but they're not talking consistently. They either have anxiety, they're going select mute. So school may be saying, well, they're very verbal, they don't need a device, but you still as a parent know that there's gaps where, you know, and maybe you wonder whether or not an AAC device or something similar would help bridge that for somebody.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think we'll kind of go backwards. I think the first thing that we all need to think about is that we all use assistive technology every single day. Like, it's here. We text, we email, we're doing everything. You put things into your calendar. All that is assistive technology, which is why I try and speak to AT first before going down to AAC, because I think people get so stuck on a specific system or a specific, I've got to get them to say this, that we often miss the mark. So part of that is that we're using it all day long, and that they need to be able to have that opportunity as well. How we go about that is by trying and giving those opportunities. We don't expect a baby to talk until they're 1 year old. So if that's truly the case, I shouldn't be expecting someone that I'm randomly giving an AAC device to. I expect them to do a 1 word at 1 year. And a lot of our kids break that mold extremely fast, but I think it comes down to patience is key. And a lot of the time we miss those patient marks because we're trying to prove something when we shouldn't be pushing at all. We should just be taking our time and letting that kind of work itself through. And those kids are going to do exactly what they want to do for us, or even young adults. Like, if you can't build that trust with them and presume potential, we're never going to get there anyways, because you're not going to be able to kind of set those good habits in place early.
Wonderful. Well, we certainly appreciate your knowledge base. I see some nice comments here in the chat box, and let me just talk a little bit about our company as we finish up this webinar. Christina, if you don't mind going back a couple of slides, it tells a little bit more about what we do. And I just want to make sure, no worries,
Sorry.
no worries. So
I tried going backwards and it closed it right out. So hang on here.
That's okay.
There we go.
So at Consolidated Planning Group, we can help get you the information you need to move forward with your family member who has a disability. If you need a lawyer for guardianship or a special needs trust, we're a good place to start. You'll want to start with us because we can recommend the perfect lawyer for you. If you're looking for how do I pay for things, we can advise you and that kind of thing. There's a lot of mistakes that can be made that your typical financial advisor is not aware of. There's very few financial advisors in the entire nation that understand the world of special needs. And so we're very privileged to work with these families. So we'll send you the deck of slides. If you're listening as a podcast, please reach out to us to ask for the slides. You can email us actually send it to me. It's mhaynes, M-H-A-Y-N-E-S @cpgcares.net. We're just so glad to be of help to you. So we're going to wrap this up. We really appreciate your time today, and we're going to send you a great email just in a little bit. So thank you very much. And I guess I'm going to end the webinar. Have a great day.